Hello. Good live chat. Okay. Got everything set up. Swords. New sword day. What? Well, it's probably just starting. Oh, that's not quite where I wanted it. Woohoo! Yeah, something. That's more what I was looking for. There it is.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
It's just a German guy. I like the name.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Someone wants to know what your favorite sword is.
I do stream more. So YouTube's rolling out a new live format that I'm trying to work on. And so I'm trying to see if that really kind of like works for me. Because the way I like to stream, the old streaming format didn't really work for me. So I'm hoping to see if this one works better for me. But we'll see.
The writing Rowlet says they love you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so someone asked my favorite sword. My favorite sword is... What is my favorite sword? So it keeps fluctuating. I will always love the two-handed sword. I just really like two-handed swords. But I have commissioned a custom sword that I'm very excited about, which is a hand-and-a-half sword with a basket hilt, which is going to be so interesting, I think, to get my hands on. I can't wait to try it out. Yeah, yeah. I'll wander over and check, but if you could keep calling out questions at least.
Okay. Someone says, is a great sword and a montante the same?
Depending on who you ask, yes. Potentially no. So Oakshot, if you use the Oakshot typology, greatsword means more particularly a sword from, what is it, the 13th? That might have been a 13th century sword. But basically a very early form of two-handed sword is what the Oakshot typology refers to as a greatsword, which a montante, being a 16th century sword into a 17th century thing, is just, it's not that sword. So if you define it narrowly like that, then yes. But I think the greatsword is a very useful term. So I tend to use it to refer to any sort of true two-handed sword, because I find that two-handed sword can be deceptive in its own way. Because, you know, if you take like a long sword, I mean, yeah, sure, I can use this in one hand if I need to, but it's, at the end of the day, it is meant to be used predominantly in two hands. So is this not a two-handed sword? So I think I like greatsword as a way to differentiate between long swords and greatswords, if that makes sense. I think it's a more useful word. And language is always changing, so I don't have any issues personally. Because not too long ago, a longsword would be called a broadsword. And now we call that something else. Language changes. So I think it's totally fine to call a montante a greatsword, personally. Some people will be fussy about that and not like it, but I like it.
Someone says they love your sword.
Oh, thank you.
Someone says it's unironically suave how his fundamentals look. Someone asked who I was. Someone said they have to go already, but they just wanted to pop in.
Oh, thanks for joining.
Who would you rather be trapped in a room with for 24 hours? Mayor or George Silver? Also, was Mayor a thief?
Mayor. Okay. I'm gonna say I'd rather be locked in the room with Mayor. I think Mayor is, yes, Mayor's a thief. He He's a white collar thief. Let's say that. He embezzled. That was his crime. He embezzled government funds to fund his HEMA obsession. He is the first, I like to say that he is the first martyr of HEMA. He blew all of his wealth buying swords and manuscripts and texts and everything because he was worried that the martial tradition was fading and he wanted to try to preserve it. So he spent buku bucks trying to basically catalog and document and basically preserve everything he can about this martial tradition before it's lost to time, which I'd say in many parts he was successful. Some of his work is, fantastic, but to get the money for it, he embezzled a lot of money. And when he was caught, he was executed, making him the first martyr of HEMA.
What's a movie with realistic swordplay?
The Deluge is one. The Duelists is pretty great. I totally whiffed that.
Which one of those two fight, hair or silver? I'm guessing that's what they're referring to.
Maybe Mayor? I don't know how much fighting Mayor actually did. I don't think he's technically a fencing master. I think he was just an enthusiast, but I don't quite, I need to double check that. I don't know that he's actually a master. He might have just been a big nerd.
What is your opinion on hook swords? They have a massive lack of stabbing, so does it make them inferior to a classic longsword?
I wouldn't say that makes them inferior because they gain other things. But I always kind of like defer to this idea of if it was really good, we'd see more of it. What do we see a lot of? We see a lot of gently curved swords, all sorts of sabers, shamshirs, even some slightly funky shapes like a yatagan that kind of like does a little funky thing, but they all kind of fall into the same category of gently curved one-handed swords. You see a lot of straight-bladed one-handed swords, right? Like this blade, or this side sword here, yes, it's got extra bits and bobs on it, but at the end of the day, if you ignore all that junk here, what do you have? You have a simple straight-bladed one-handed cut and thrust sword. This sword in its essence is pretty much as universal a sword as you can possibly get, short of a one-handed saber of much the same essence, right? These are near universal for good reason. A hook sword is very not universal. It is something done in a very narrow part of the world as far as like where you see it used. And so although I don't particularly know much about their use, and I think they are potentially capable weapons in their own right, I think there's something to be said for the fact that they are so rare in the global scale. Whereas a straight blade, one-handed sword, any culture that has made a sword an awful lot like this.
Opinion on how Avatar: The Last Airbender handles sword fighting, mainly just the blue spirit.
Oh boy, it's been a minute since I've watched that. I can't really comment. I do like that he has a case of swords, though. That's pretty cool. If I remember correctly, because his two swords, they're carried as one, right? They're like they have like half guards, and they just kind of like get like slapped together, and they get sheathed as a single sword, which would make them into a case of swords by definition, I suppose. And that's pretty cool.
Now we got a bunch of questions. I'm gonna read these out, and you answer in whatever order.
Okay.
What is the hardest sword fight you've been in?
I
want to know if you own any armor.
I do own armor, yes.
Do you think the leaf-like swords should have gone out of style?
The leaf what?
Leaf-like swords.
Okay, I'm guessing like the leaf-bladed swords, which they did go out of style. So do I think they should have, or because they did?
Do you think that they should have gone out of style?
Yeah, that's another one that I kind of like throw up to the, like, if they were good enough, they would have been more universal, but they're a fairly modest design. So I do find it a little odd that they did just kind of fade out of existence. And I don't really have an answer for why. I don't even have good conjecture for why. Yeah, that's one I've wondered about myself. I don't know why they really faded, because they give you a lot. You know, they give you a point and they give you some meat to cut with. It seems like a pretty good balance, and yet it's just they're not qualities that really lasted. I don't know why.
Going back to what's the hardest sword fight you've been in?
That's a hard one to answer too, because you know I've been better and worse at different points of my life. So I think like the hardest loss I ever had was my very first tournament, where I got out of the pools, and then my first fight was with Mackenzie, which might be a familiar name for people who are doing HEMA in the comments. Yeah, he put me down with 0 difficulty in my first tournament. That was quite a while ago, so I would say that was a very, very hard fight for me, and that I was dead before I knew it.
So the same person who has 5 hook swords says they've seen a lot of people hook the hook swords, take their hook, and swing it around like a maniac to extend the blade. Someone mentioned that you're thick. Is there any one sword that you would consider the easiest ever, like throughout all of history?
The easiest ever?
Yeah, I think I meant easiest. They put easier.
It's an interesting question. I'm gonna frame that in a particular way. The easiest one to pick up and then hurt somebody with would be a small sword. I'm sure of that, because they weigh practically nothing. They're a super duper long needle, and all you have to do is get the end into the other person, and you have hurt them quite severely. So as far as like, because when it comes to cutting, there's a degree of edge alignment that has to happen. It's remarkably easy to botch a cut. And sure, some of their cutting swords, like a super specialized cutting sword, would probably be my next best guess. Be like, just give somebody a really good cutting sword and just have them just go like, whack. And I'm like, yeah, that'll work. But I'm thinking, even then, I think as far as inflicting harm upon somebody with the least amount of skill, give them a small sword and tell them to just stick them with the pointy end. And I think they'll be very dangerous, is my other thought. Somebody who cuts are a bit easier to deal with, defensively speaking, than somebody who's just sitting here just like jabbing. Like somebody who just wants to stab you really bad with no regard for what you're doing is extremely dangerous. Somebody who will just disengage and thrust at the first opportunity, regardless of what threat you're giving or what lines you're like, who just disregards your sword entirely just to try to stab you. That's very dangerous to deal with. So they probably won't survive, but they'll definitely hurt somebody before they go down.
Right, so we have several questions that came in. One person's been waiting. Syrup versus frogmouth elm.
Wait, what was the first one?
Syrup versus
syrup.
Frogmouth. It says syrup. Yeah,
syrup.
like maple syrup. That's what they put.
Syrup.
Syrup.
Was that a typo?
I don't know. That's a typo. Please put back in, and I'll move on to the next one. Are there warm-ups that you do? Like all sports, they imagine that we prime your muscles.
Yes, there are. I can kind of go through that quickly. I'll just what? Because the warm-ups. Let's see. So kind of like some of the standard stuff we do is, you know, we'll start with some like toe up. You definitely want to get this stuff warmed up. So we'll do these toe ups here. Then we'll become bouncing, then jacks, then back to bouncing, then toe ups. And by the time you're done, everything through there is just so tight. And you're like, oh boy, yeah, that needed it. So that's a good way to start off. We'll do same thing. We'll try to open up the shoulders. So we'll do like big circles, they become smaller circles, and then reverse, small circles become big circles. We will try to open up our wrists. like this, just rotating the sword, switching sides, working it this way, working it that way, over the head, just to get those wrists warmed up. And then it's usually a good idea to get some like lunging in. Whoops, and not lose your balance. And just stuff in that sort of like active dynamic stretching as opposed to yeah, that's why the turning lunges. You can do like sword squats. Yeah, just stuff in that family of.
You see that one from the back?
There's also ankle pivots, so pushing into the ground and then rotating the ankles there. This feels really good right now. Actually, I should have done this to start. But yeah, I think that more or less answers that. What's next?
Okay, so the person clarified, no, pouring syrup into a frog mouth as like waterboarding. I love you, person.
Sure.
I like that.
If you have in some way detained the person wearing it to such an extent that you can now directly pour syrup into their helmet, I think at that point you can do whatever you want to them anyways. So I don't think it particularly matters.
Their torture of choice.
Gosh, that'd be such a slow, miserable way to go. Yeah, right? Except I think in that case the molasses was at such a high mass that it was just hauling.
Can you implement bow staff skills into a spear or halberd?
Absolutely.
Like that was quick. If you had the opportunity to fence anyone in the HEMA community,
I don't know. Martin Fabian wouldn't be a bad choice. He makes these. These are his babies, the Siggies. He is very well regarded.
Favorite medieval weapon in general?
He would destroy me, by the way. I would not stand a chance against him. But it would hopefully be a very educational destruction. What's my favorite? What?
Medieval weapon in general.
I don't know. It's hard to like pick just one. I like longswords a lot. I like billhooks a lot. I like halberds a lot. But I think I like billhooks more than halberds. But yeah, it's something between billhook and longsword, I think, for medieval. Although my favorite billhooks don't really turn up till the Renaissance. My favorite form factor of billhooks are a very Renaissance thing. So actually, if we're saying medieval, then longsword. That was easy. Just had to do some mental gymnastics.
I know. I like watching how you got to that answer.
Yeah. Yeah, if you say Renaissance, then my favorite sword goes, like my favorite weapon goes out the window. I can't, there are so many things in the Renaissance I love. I cannot give you an answer if you ask Renaissance. Medieval, I can just say longsword. Renaissance, it's like, oh, yo.
On the other hand, what would you consider to be the hardest ever to properly build throughout all of history?
Oh, shoot, what's it called? I know what it is. What's it called, though? It's an Indian sword. It is a whip sword. It is a sword that is flexible and whippy. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's that one. Such with an S, maybe? Whip sword. Indian whip sword. What's it called? I don't know. That thing is terrifying. And there's some that have like multiple blades. So you can have like a 5-bladed whip sword. And it's just 5.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. They just whip around. Yeah, that thing's terrifying. That's got to be the hardest sword to use ever. I can't imagine. Yes. Yes, I believe so.
Is there a move where you hit them with a pommel?
Yes. Many.
Like those?
There's like a bunch of them. But let's see. Thinking about some. So there's one where you can shove aside with your cross. That one, yeah. So you can come up. Normally their blade would be higher. So you'd be like cross on cross, and you would hook them with your cross, shove it aside, and pop through with the pommel. That's typically how those go. There's another one where you just go like high with it. Again, their sword would be up here. Yeah, let's not even worry about that. So you're up here. You would go 1, 2, like that. That would work too. There's what other ones are there? I mean, I guess you could pommel from that sword grab there if you wanted to. Of course, there's the Mordschlag. So flip the thing around, boom, hit with the pommel. That's always an option.
And the rest of the sword.
Yeah, or you can do it from half sword. Come through like that.
You had mentioned grappling. What's a good guard to allow grappling? It sounds like this person they just want to grapple.
To allow.
How do they get to grappling quickly?
To get to grappling quickly,
Yeah, so
Kron.
Kron
Gets the grappling instantly. Kron is just this. If you want to like get into a grapple immediately, like you just want to, like this is not going to necessarily put you in a, like this is just going to make grappling happen. This is not a recommendation to do this every time you want to try to set up a grapple, because sometimes this will not go your way. You'll get into a grapple, you just might not get into one with advantage. Is if you are something like this, doing that, again, normally that would not, doing that will get you in their face immediately. Swords will be up in the air. They are no longer at play. It turns into grabby stuff immediately. That will almost inevitably turn into a grapple, unless you do it from too far away. At which point, you drive up, and then they go hey hoo hoo, and they slice your hand. That's not fun. So yeah, if it's because of those kind of things, right? Boom, or they go high and then they. But hey, if you count slicing as grappling, then that's maybe still what you want.
Someone asked about giant double-bladed video game axes. Would they be useful in real life, or is there already one in real life?
Giant double blade. I think you have your answer right there. If you were describing it as a giant double-bladed axe, the answer is no.
Someone says, have you ever seen pole arms and noticed these pom-pom looking things on them? What are your thoughts? Are these useful or only aesthetic?
Pom Poms. I assume like the so like tassels or like
blades and Chinese longswords. Pom-pom looking things.
I'm assuming they're talking about on the hilt, or not the hilt, the haft. Hey, I can break this out. Yeah, so if you mean like having like little poofs like here, whatever, there's some debate as to like what value they have. Some people say it's good for like keeping liquid from running, not necessarily blood, but I know there's at least one document talking about how every pike in the formation should have tassels mounted up mounted somewhere, so that if they're marching in the rain, because you have to remember that a pike is super duper long, right? So the sheer surface area of a pike held in the march, that is a ton of, or not necessarily in the march, but like if they're being held, if you're fighting in the rain with a pike, and you can think like 14 feet of pole sticking out, that's a lot of surface area to collect rainwater. And that rainwater is all going to come running down the haft towards your hands. So what that one person recommends is that every pike should be equipped with a tassel to soak up the water that runs down the haft and keep it away from the hands. So that's one suggestion. I believe the Chinese pole arms tend to call for one because they like them for distraction, that you can sit there and you can move it around and swish it, and it's just visually confusing if you sit there and swirl it, and as you move it's just more to distract them.
Favorite style of armor, plate, mail, or others?
Right now it has for a long time been 15th century German.
Plate, mail, or others?
Sure. Sorry, 15. I got distracted. There's a smear on my halberd. I got distracted. 15th century Gothic. I was about to say Gothic. Gothic plate.
What do you think about the Spartan double-sided spear?
Fine. So the Sarisa? That's totally fine. It's useful having something on the butt end you can strike with. Of course, having nothing on the butt end, you still have, what is this? A quarterstaff, right? Boom. Quarterstaffs, very effective weapons. So even if you don't have a butt spike, you can still absolutely brain somebody with one of these.
Comments were kind of similar. What's your opinion on the idea that the spear is the best weapon ever? And then someone else asked, you know where the stereotype of katanas being the best and strongest sword comes from?
I'm going to answer the last one first. Pop culture, boom. The martial arts rebirth in what, the 80s, I guess. Yeah, I like kind of the 80s. There's also a little bit of a trying to think. It's a dated term, not one to really use for any modern conversation about your own personal fascinations. But the Oriental, it was the historical period of Orientalism in Europe, where there was this fetishization of the East, and they were fascinated with it. And it was all about, look at this exotic thing I have, look at this beautiful, beautiful sword I found when I was traveling abroad. That kind of, they're not necessarily concerned about the culture of the thing, just the fascination with it because it's foreign. And I think that's kind of where it started. And then I think we can really think the pop culture boom of sort of a similar vibe, essentially a revival where karate, like the Karate Kid, not necessarily that the Karate Kid was bad or anything, just that pop culture surge of fascination of Eastern martial arts, I think, is where the katana stuff really blew up. And then spears, I'm going to say yes-ish, yes with a asterisk. I think spear is not universally a better weapon. As Matt Easton likes to say, he'd rather have a dagger in a phone booth than a spear. But by using my metric of proliferation, I would be shocked to learn if there was a society that never invented a spear, ever. I think my metric is always how ubiquitous a weapon was it, and the spear was ubiquitous. It is everywhere. Everybody, everywhere has invented the spear independently or observed it and made it spears are universal. And in that respect, I think, yeah, they have to be, right?
Is the halberd just the best melee weapon ever made, or what?
Halberds are good, but halberds are great. I love halberds, but they are not intrinsically a straight upgrade to the spear. They have quirks that mean that they are not necessarily superior to the spear, but they are definitely good weapons.
In your opinion, what country makes the best halberd? Still in Ukraine? Do they make halberds, or is that?
Oh, is that a now or a then?
I guess that's good clarification.
And if it's a then, I don't actually know.
Was there ever a double-bladed sword, like a double-bladed lightsaber that Darth Maul uses?
None that I'm aware of that were ever meant to be used.
Someone said you're being so nice about describing weeds. People from Eastern countries ever have a similar type of fascination with European weapons other than muskets?
I'm not sure. I think there's something to be said for how Japan. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a weapon exactly, but Japan had a bit of that where they tried to reform themselves to look more Western, and I know that was a huge. I don't want to go too deep into it because I just don't know that much about it, and I don't want to mischaracterize anything about it. But there was a period of reformation in Japan where they became very keen politically in enacting reform to remodel Japan after the West, which I would kind of blanket say. So that included sabers. predominantly firepower, right? Guns was definitely the main thing, but that also meant the officers were carrying sabers too, as part of the Reformation.
This one has a very well thought out record. The medieval period had a ton of schools following philosophies of how weapons are used in medieval modern. Why do you think modern times lack those schools for modern weapons?
That's interesting.
I thought she was about to take you out.
I thought so too. Anyways, why do I think? I think it's just. I think there's a cultural shift as far as martiality goes. A lot of there's a lot of personal honor and stuff tied up with martial weapons, like swords and things. Historically speaking, Meyer. Here, actually, I want to read Meyer to you. I think reading Meyer and then thinking about how things are now might give you some ideas about why this sort of mindset would have died out. But it's not entirely died out. Again, that martial arts resurgence in the 80s, I think, has a lot of that shared thing of seeing moral value in martial art and seeing it as a way to kind of guide society, instill values, resilience, that sort of stuff into a population. And that's very much the same sort of stuff that Meyer digs into in his own work. Here we go. I got right to it. Therefore, it is no surprise that this practice of free knights has not merely declined, but has even become somewhat contemptible and not lacking in prejudice towards the age-old praiseworthy custom. Elsewhere, this aforementioned cause is claimed to be sufficient and occurs among knowledgeable fighting men, principally because, in the case of guns, nothing functions correctly without other equipment, weapons, and arms, and occasionally the entire battle must be stopped due to such fragile weapons and handguns, because the guns cannot be used for some reason, as knowledgeable fighting men attest. Skipping some of this. Let's see. Because this knightly art, and indeed all arts, is difficult to grasp and learn correctly and productively as an adult, therefore persons who embody intelligence and understanding among all people and at every time in history have devoted themselves so that their young people may also, in addition to other free and good virtues associated with honesty, virility, be instructed in this knightly art, how one should skillfully use all types of equipment and weapons, blah, blah, blah. He references Rome. They like talking about Rome a lot. But basically, yeah, Meyer goes on bemoaning how guns are removing the value placed on these time-honored traditions. And I think you just get into this clash of modernity approaching versus traditionalism, and that ever-present battle between the two, of each new generation kind of bucking the trends of the previous one. Until I think at some point, eventually, that martiality just kind of went away. And there's also an element of it becoming exclusive. So you see a gradual democratization of fencing culture as you get into that 16th century point. And then 17th into the 18th and stuff, it starts to get grabbed and yanked back by the nobility. And they start to like dibs it. And they deliberately enact policies that prevent the common folk from continuing those martial traditions. So then when the nobility got to the point of not really being all that big into the fencing stuff anymore, there was nobody left to kind of carry the torch.
There's a couple people online building giant sword techniques.
Oh yeah, I've seen that stuff. That stuff's neat. I am curious to see where they get. But at the end of the day, until they can get it moving fast enough to do the kind of stuff that just a normal longsword can do, they will be hard pressed to get anywhere with it. The techniques to employ against someone swinging something like that are the exact same techniques that someone would employ against somebody who cuts like this. You void it, you bait them into attacking at you, you pull away, and you counter time into the opening that they've given you, Knockreisen. So if they take a big, huge swing at you, which they have to with those swords, right? Those things are huge. They have to go boom with them. As that cut comes in at you, you either pull away or you shift off to the side and you try to draw that attack out, or potentially redirect it. You don't ever want to just stop a big stroke like that, but you can help it continue on its way. So if that big cut's coming whoosh at you, you can always beat into the stroke and redirect it, and then hit it while they're recovering. Which a big sword like that is going to have a very hard time redirecting itself. You know, like a sword like this, I can provoke that action. I can go boom and whip it around and provoke somebody to beat at it, and then my sword be gone by the time they get to it. You're not going to do that with one of those big swords, one of those big like buster swords. It's not going to happen. I don't care how quick you get with it. There's just too much mass. It will always be outsped by something like this. You just have to be very careful about how you fight it, because yeah, if you try to block it, that's going to be another story. Yes, yes it is. I'm not particularly good at it, but it is a thing. I don't have two swords handy for it, but I have my dagger. And I guess I could do it with my longsword, but it wouldn't look very good. But yeah, you can. This is probably the most common way you'll see it done is sword and dagger. You can, ooh, not like that. Yeah, stuff like that, or getting it that way, doing stuff like that. That kind of fun stuff. Yeah, this is the one where you can get it out to there. That is a really fun displacement. But if you do it, if you mistime it, you get stabbed. So you have to be able to get the displacement all the way around. You whoosh.
I do like this question. For its, I don't know. Would it be useful to stick a bear trap to the end of a long stick, kind of like a spear, and then just bash it against the enemy's head?
I don't know why. If you have been able to do that, right? If you've made that happen, then you've landed a thrust. And if you've landed a thrust, why didn't you just stab them? You're adding a ton of weight. I think it'd be great in a horror movie. It'd be a great horror movie weapon, but it's overthinking the problem. Like if I've gotten to a position where I have hit them, triggered the bear trap, it is snapshot on their face. If I just have spear, I've just stabbed them in the face, and that's probably honestly the more immediate solution here.
Someone said they're gonna have to look at Mayor's philosophy.
Oop.
Someone said you're hella cute. Me and someone else agreed. What do you consider the worst or most useless widespread technique taught for sword fighting?
I mean, if they're taught, I mean, I can't really think of like a useless one. Yeah. If it's being taught in the context of like people are like, it's not just one weirdo being like, "Ah, this works, I swear," and people are actually teaching this, then it probably works.
Someone said, "Thank you for your great answer."
Wow.
So you're telling me that dodging directly into a sword doesn't make you invincible?
No, probably not.
Do you find the drills to be the best remedy to mastering yourself, or do you find the actual battles among peers more helpful?
They must follow one into the other. They cannot really exist in isolation. I think if you could only do one, fighting people is better than like the other one, right? If you only do one, if I only sit here and I practice forms forever, I will have the most beautiful forms, but I won't know how to apply them. On the other hand, if all I do is fight, I will get really good at fighting. But you might not learn things that you could be doing better. You know, you might have, it's the classic like unorthodox fighter versus the orthodox fighter kind of thing. Samurai Champloo, Mugen versus what's the other guy's name? The other guy's name. Mugen was voiced by Steve Bloom. So
that's why you remember him.
Yeah, that's why I remember Mugen. It's Steve Bloom. And then the other guy. But the other guy was a samurai, and Mugen was just this like street urchin guy who could like sword fight real good. Jin. I was thinking it was Jin, and I'm like, no, it's not Jin. I'm thinking of someone else. I'm like, oh no, it was Jin. But yeah, that's the classic debate, right? The unorthodox fighter versus the orthodox fighter. Mugen is an example of somebody who has fought, but they have no formal training. They're still really good because they fought a whole lot, but they make mistakes that could have been remedied through training. So the best thing is to do both in balance.
This one makes me think about how you don't like the rude options in video games.
Oh yeah?
Someone said, do you ever get toxic while playing video games?
No.
You don't want to be rude to the NPCs. You don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah, no, I am always a kill them with kindness kind of person. For example, in For Honor, all of my emotes are very friendly. I don't have any insulting emotes whatsoever. I was starting to main Highlander back in the day, and I want to walk you through. Okay, there was one kind of disrespectful one, but it's like so like brutally grotesque. I was just like, I have to take this one because it's so weird. Anybody playing For Honor in the group? It's the one where Highlander stabs his sword into their leg, and then he kicks it, and it swings, and the pommel goes like into their head, and then he like pushes down on their foot, and it does this like squeaky saw sound, and goes ee! And the whole person like leans up, and he pulls it out. That's the most disrespectful thing I have, but it's just the fact that it squeaks. It just goes like ee! Okay. But other than that, the executions I took on him is the one where he walks up and he like pulls out a mug and he clacks it with the guy, and they drink together, and then the guy dies, and he's like, oh well. And you know, stuff like the handshake emotes or whatever. Lots of salutes. I love having salutes emotes. So yeah, I never do any of the like mean toxic stuff. I always try to just be very respectful. Always bow, always, you know, salute. Usually have some sort of emote. The one where Warden goes down and he kind of like prays. That's the one I use if I win. You know, I never use the insults.
Carrying dagger or the buckler? Which one do you prefer?
I prefer the buckler because I'm not good. The dagger takes way more work. A buckler, like if you're just holding a buckler in front of you, you're already halfway there. Like just if you have no idea what else to do this and fight around it, and you will at least be doing something useful. You cannot do that with a dagger. If I try to use a dagger the same way, if I just go like, ha, wham, fingers gone.
I'm gonna do this last one, and I'm going inside because it's cold.
Oh, really? Cold?
What is your least favorite part of the community? I mean, it's not cold. I'm not moving like you are.
Yeah, but you got a blanket.
Yeah, I should do. What's your least favorite part of the community?
The vendetta against sport fencing. That's probably it. I don't like that vendetta against sport fencing. It makes no sense. Like I understand it, I guess. It's this like knee-jerk reaction of like they're not doing real sword fighting, we're doing real sword fighting, but we're not doing real sword fighting either. They're operating under constraints, we're operating under constraints. None of us are actually fighting each other to the death. So like none of us are doing like real sword fighting. So they just have more rules that sportify it more than we do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different thing. But I also think sport fencing didn't provide what a lot of people were looking for, and it didn't provide me what I was looking for. But that doesn't mean I hold anything against it. It's just I wanted to use a longsword.
Okay, I'm out while you're not talking anymore.
Yeah, now I have to go read the chat. Look what you've done to me. Yeah. And now I gotta go keep tabs on the chat. Where do I place the dogs? The doge into by category. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've been to Doge's Palace. Is it a specific sword there? I don't remember there being a particular sword attributed to the Doge, but maybe there was. I don't remember though. Have I thought up a move and used it during a fight? Like a new move? No. I've thought of a technique I wanted to employ and then I used it. Favorite food, pizza. I think a spear with a drill at the end would be good against armor. Probably not. I don't know. I guess, like, I don't know if there's tech, like, I think if we're talking in a sci-fi capacity, sure. Because you can drill through metal, but it's very demanding on drills. Like, most drills will break before they get through armor, unless you are kind of like putting oil down to help with the friction and heat buildup in the drill and everything. So you would need like really specialized stuff. Maybe it could be done with modern technology. But I think, again, the sci-fi tech would help you with some of the weight concerns as well. And then the part where you have to actually get through. Again, it'd be cool in a sci-fi setting. I don't know if it would work out with modern technology. Bonk. Does the dog have a sword? No, unfortunately not. The Albion Doge. Doge. I am not familiar with it. I have to look. Hello. There. Yeah, I keep thinking about the angle of axe blades on halberds, and I feel like this right here is the answer. Is that every time I cut at this thing, boom, look at that, it lands dead on. I think that's why it's angled. But angling, if it's like a normal sized axe and you like hit, it's not necessarily going to be as dead on. But when you get to halberd length, suddenly, yeah, at this point, it'll hit dead on with something this sized. I don't know, something I'm toying around with. I know Lindy Beige says it's because, or theorizes that it's so that you can thrust past and cut, slice really well on the way back, or like boom here, and then shink your way through. I think that makes sense too, but I don't know. Something I've been chewing on. Is a halberd in a spear category or an axe? That's a good question. I think I'd put it in a spear category. I think it has more. It's more of a spear, I think, than it is an axe by its nature. I mean, look at this. You see, like this feels spear. This feels spear to me. I don't think the techniques you would use with it differ much from a like winged spear, or that has a cutting edge on it or something. Is there an actual axe? Oh, that's a good question. Ish, kind of. I don't remember. I can't think of any that have a blade shape like this, but yeah, you can find axes that have blade, like, you know, like there's the pole axe, that has, you know, axe and a spike. And there are some. If you mean like a hand axe, there's a. I think there's a French axe that looks kind of like that. And there are certainly some hand axes that have axe blades and spikes. I'm just trying to think of any that have a head, like a single piece axe head like this. I don't know. Nothing's coming to mind, but maybe. Hello, Brooke. Opinions on the flail? I don't like it. Well, I don't like the hand flail. The polearm flail might be a different story. I'm thinking about trying to get a sparring version. I might have answers for you then. But I do not like the hand flail. It is frustrating. I'd rather just have a mace. Oh, sure. Yeah, halberd is a polearm, as is like a poleaxe and a spear. It's just a question of like, is a halberd more of an axe or is it more of a spear? I think like between the two, I think it's more spear than it is axe, but that's just talk. Categorically, it's a polearm. Let's see here. Favorite guard. I'm just going to do this from a visual perspective. Well, yeah, I think my favorite guards from a visual perspective is down here. Is sort of like a Vexel. I like Vexel a lot, and I like it. I like it on the right and the left, and then I really like Meyer's Zornhau, or not Zornhau, Vomtog, up above the head. I think it's just a really commanding looking guard. I love it. I love the energy of it. It's just so whoosh, right? Like boom. Put that on a business card. Looks great. Would a bomb be useful in a sword duel? Maybe. If you can get far enough away from it. Dagger, but with a halberd head would be the best one. That'd be very short. Is the spear homemade? Not the halberd I have is not exactly home. The haft is. Well, we made the haft, but the head is from GGFB. My day is good. I think a halberd would do well in a zombie apocalypse. The helmet? It's just my old fencing mask. You could learn to use a halberd from a fencing club, probably probably not a sport fencing club. I don't think they do halberds, but like a HEMA club, sure. Windlass might have done an executioner's axe, like maybe. I don't know. I tend to spend a lot of time dwelling on the Holy Roman Empire of late, actually. Not the Roman Empire, but the Holy Roman Empire. Like, yeah, not obviously you know the difference, Vito, but for other people, yeah, who don't know that the Holy Roman Empire is not the Roman Empire. Although the Holy Roman Empire would probably like you to think, or would have liked you to think that they are uh, complicated. It's a mess. It's just the whole thing. But for the most part, usefully distinct entities. Can I speak German? Not really. I can go ooh every now and then. They're all hear a word and go like ah, but I would be lost if somebody spoke a sentence to me. Should you ever kick when sword fighting? Yes, not often, but yes. The issue with sword fights is that if you go to kick, there's a sword, and that sword might go. So what tends to happen is that you will kick if the swords have in some way been taken out of the equation, if briefly. So the very common one is the swords go high, opening up down below, and you go whammo. Fiore has a sword grab where he's in the grab, he grabs like this, drives up, boom, strikes the knee. It's never like a super duper high kick. Like you're never knocking their block off with a kick. It's more like stomping kind of stuff, or like that kind of thing. It's usually targeted to the knees. Boom there. You might go up to the groin, but it's all like waist height stuff. It doesn't go higher than the waist usually. What sort of hits can you perform with a bladed weapon? Cuts and chops and tears. I mean, there's so many things you could do, right? As far as like the Lichtenauer tradition, it boils it down into 3 categories, I guess. 3? Wait. No, wait, I'm mixing things up. I would say you've got like your hews, where you are hewing. It's a cut like boom, sort of a like beat. I would say there are. So that covers a lot of it. There are slices, I think, or I'd say slashes is what I want to say. Sort of slashing actions where it's like it's sort of in between. So on the 2 ends of the spectrum, there's percussive hews where it's just boom, I'm striking and I'm hewing through. Then there is slicing, which is where you have placement, and you are pulling the blade through, and basically draw cutting with the blade. And I would say slashing is a sort of a blend of the 2. I think you would describe it like how katanas tend to cut. As slashing, it's cutting and drawing through. I'm exaggerating it a lot here. But for clarity's sake, exaggerating the slash, that kind of motion, like that, as opposed to a hew, which is more like that. So the blade, the essential thing is that in the hew, the blade's going bonk like this, like whoosh, and the slice is going pull through like that, or so the slash is pull through, which blends in the element of a slice where you do the pulling. So it's combining a hew and a slice, and you get a slash. That's my own personal definition. Do a cool sword move. Would it be easier to set the enemy on fire? I think it's probably harder to set people on fire than you might think. Why did Fiore keep grabbing things? Yeah, I've never used my rapier against a really big sword. The main thing is if you are out getting like outmasked, like even against like a long sword, this is important, is don't let them engage on your blade. In a rapier versus longsword fight, or the same thing would be like, I think they will dominate every bind they get into because they have 2 hands on their sword. Their swords maybe the same weight, but the fact that they have 2 hands on their sword means that they can really bully you around every time those swords are in contact. So the rapier is incentivized to not let the swords touch and constantly disengage and try to outrange or outspeed with the tip, trying to basically very quickly get those disengages and thrusts and withdraw before the longsword can do anything. But that's easier said than done. Meanwhile, anytime that longsword can actually bind up the rapier, it's bad times for the rapier. Cool. Someone want cool sword stuff. Let me think. One of my favorite moves is the Shilhao. That's where you basically displace and hit them by inverting your sword. Let's see. I'm going to switch over here. Here we go. You can see it here. So as I go in to strike here, I invert and turn and morph my cut. So it's starting off like a cut like this, wham. But I go invert, and then I strike with the false edge, or the back edge, half edge, whatever you like. And you can see what that does to the opposing blade. Is it whips it out to the side like that, or alternatively puts it in some position where I can get control over it and land a hit. Now you can also make it into a thrust if you do it from further away. If I do it from back here, it becomes a thrust. If I do it closer, it becomes a cut. I really like that one. There's also, in a very similar sense, there is the Svehau. I can come through and basically get my sword to a position where I am covered. I can just kind of do it out like that. But essentially cutting long way through, I can do it from the other side. Cutting this way. You can change the angle of it. So I can make it more vertical or less vertical. But ultimately what that means is that as I make that cut happen, I'm gathering their sword on mine and cutting. And this is valuable because I can hit them and still maintain contact with their sword and keep it from doing something nasty to me. Because if I go and I go, haha, hit, there's nothing necessarily to say that they don't then hit me back. So if I can hit them and take their sword at the same time, that is excellent. So a lot of these cuts are with the purpose of doing that, be it that Shilhao, assuming I don't slice my hand on it, Shilhao, or a Zverhao. You can also Zornhao, but the important thing is doing that in a way that you have gathered their sword in the process. You could also, let's see, there's also going down that way as well. That can usually yield better results if you target, if you throw your Zornhao towards the shoulder they have cut from, you can get yourself into a situation where you have closed their sword out on the outside line and you're safe on the inside line. Especially if you can kind of like move offline with it. Because that would have gone, that tends to shoot into their shoulder, which I don't have on my gentleman here, but that's why I keep missing off to the side, because it's in that when you're doing it as a stifling cut, you're cutting for the sword side shoulder. So right down to that shoulder, right, boom, like that. And that, here, I'll do it to myself here. Yeah, so if you get them on that sword side, let me get over here. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, that stifling cut to the shoulder is so that they can't get to you because you have struck in between their sword, their body, and you've trapped their sword on the outside, keeping you safe. Hello, Beth. How would you, oh yeah, I can talk about Duplarin. You just finished Myers Art of Combat? How did, that thing is huge. There's so much in that book. Have you done everything in it? You've done like the longsword, the Dusak, the rapier, dagger, grappling, quarterstaff, spear, or quarterstaff, halberd, pike. You did the whole book? Oh, good question from Vito. Let's see, I'm trying to gather my questions here before I wander back. Okay, let's see. So, Duplaren, I want to do Duplaren. Vito's question about do you normally focus on the singular final blows, or are there flurry drills? Do I like throwing weapons? I like throwing weapons in theory. I am terrible at throwing. I'm garbage. I've never been able to throw things well. I'm terrible at it. I do a little bit of sword and buckler. I think sword and buckler is the second most popular thing. Well, okay, third. I think the most popular thing is long sword. Second most popular thing is side sword. Third most popular thing is side sword and buckler. Rapier is further down, I think. But then that might be a regional thing. Side sword's very popular around here, but rapier might be more popular than side sword internationally. I'm not sure, but I get the impression that it's side sword. Quick rule of thumb for redesigning fantasy swords: make them skinnier, make them thinner. Like thin this way, skinny this way. Just make them smaller. That usually fixes it. A lot of fantasy swords are big giant paddles. Just shrink them down, and you'll solve a lot of the problems. Is a great body physique required to be a good duelist? I think ultimately skill is the most important thing, but if two people have equal skill, the person with better physique is going to probably win. Okay, I think that largely catches things up. I'm using a bike stand to hold the sword. Is there any weapon combat reference material that I recommend for artist reference? Ooh. Meyer's book's really cool. Meyer, and the Goliath manuscript all have a lot of pictures of the fencers. Okay, so I want to answer. I'm going to do Duplaren, and I'm going to answer Vito's question. Okay, so Duplaren. Duplaren is the doubling, basically making your sword cut twice in kind of the same action. So there are two ways to do the doubling. One is against a weak bind and one against the strong bind. So I have to now explain that. So a weak bind is where your opponent's not really giving you pressure and you can kind of push into them and move them aside. This is a weak bind right now. This will not give me a hard bind. It can't, because that requires active pressure. So if I can get a weak bind, so if I've cut and they're giving me weak pressure and I can kind of push them around and I've cut, I can turn my sword and cut them from the bind because they're weak. So I can cut without having to leave the bind. So I've gone 1, 2. So that's the first doubling, is against a weak bind. I cut from that position. Let me walk over this way so you can see this. So here, I'm here. This thing's too weak. Here, cut. Whiffed it. Cut. From the bind. Again, into the weakness, you can cut. The other one is if they are giving you pressure. So we're here, we've met in the bind, they are pushing, they're giving me pressure this way. I say, okay, I'm not going to bother trying to fight this. I could roll off and cut. That's certainly an option. But if I roll off and cut, that means that I'm open here and they could come back potentially and slice my hands as I do it. If they really push me offline, then yeah, that's a good option. They're not going to get back to me. I can immediately cut off. But if they're just giving me just enough pressure this way, where if I left, I'd be in danger, but they're still giving me push, I can turn my sword in the bind here and let their pressure pull my sword into them. So they cut themselves with with the sword. So you go bind, they push, boom, cut. Once again, over this way, bind, they start pushing, cut. Now you might think, well, why would I be turning, like, aren't I leaving all of this exposed here? And it's entirely reliant on the fact that they are pushing this way, because you're saying, you're giving them a little bit of resistance here. You're kind of neutral. You say it's like have you ever like wrestled as a kid, or you were like in a push anything and you just let the pressure go and the person just falls over? It's essentially that. We're sitting here, we're both kind of like push, 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 and one of us goes, okay, fine, boom, and they suddenly skip off out to the side, and you go, if you want to push, you can push, I'll cut you. Text to speech would be great. It encourages a lot of interaction. People like to see their messages on stream. I would love, I will look into seeing if that's an option. It would help me too. Like if I could get text to speech to have people, like I don't want to like super monetize this, but if this continues to be like the format that they do, letting people do text to speech like prompts would be super helpful for me back here to actually hear what's happening. Let's see. Would I rather use an axe or a mace? Probably an axe. The sword is being held. Oh, yeah, with the bike stand. Okay, so Vito, your question. Every move I've done is very reminiscent of finesse boxers. Does the sword training typically focus in the singular final blows you seem to be displaying? Are there flurry drills? Okay, so all of these single time counters are sort of the ideal. They are referred to by Meyer as the master cuts. These are the like what you strive towards. If you can get a single time counter, then that's incredible. That's great. That is wonderful. That is like best case scenario. You have in some way, in a single moment, taken their sword and struck them. That is the best possible outcome. But that is not, life is messy. You will not always have the opportunity to do them. So what do we do if we can't? And that's where, yeah, you get, Meyer also has tons of, I think, what you might describe as the flurry things. It's basically compound attacks that are meant to draw them into bigger and bigger parries until they eventually expose themselves and that you hit them. So Meyer's first play from tag up here is he goes, he provokes an attack against him. So they start to cut, and he goes, all right, I'm going to do my single time counter. Boom. I'm going to do my Shielhau. If I get the Shielhau just right, it will hit them, and I've done it. Wonderful. That's what I'm trying. That's my ideal. I want that single time counter. But life, again, is messy. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe it hits and it doesn't do enough. Maybe they parry it. What do? I then immediately flow off and cut down for their hands. Maybe this doesn't work. Maybe they go down and they parry it. Okay, then I immediately flick off. I come off and I flick. He describes this as a flick. He flicks his sword towards their ear. And this is meant to draw them so they've gone defense, defense, and they have to come, or I guess, defense, 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 right? You're trying to get them bigger, bigger, bigger. So you start to flick at their ear. They go, oh, I don't want to get hit. So they rush up to meet you. As soon as you see them moving, you just faint. And then, oh, not that way, this way. Then you come off and you cut to the head and you disengage with a cut around. So that very particular one, we start that flurry off by trying to get our single time counter. If it happens, fantastic. If not, we start to flurry until we can get the hit in. Do you need a lot of stamina to be a good HEMA duelist? Because you have asthma. Interesting. Stamina helps a lot in the sport capacity. I think you can still learn to do it, and I think you can become good at the martial art without necessarily having a ton of stamina. Of course, stamina is incredibly helpful, and I don't want to downplay like how useful that is. But as far as learning how to fence, you can tailor your tool set to your constraints. So for you, if being very proactive and mobile isn't really an option for you because you can't, you physically cannot, let's say like trying to fight like constantly shifting or doing like the kind of like this kind of thing where you're like happy feet. If that's not really an option for you, then don't try to play that game because it's not going to work for you. Instead, think about, how can I take a more measured, careful approach, picking my moment, trying to give good threats, but not necessarily committing more energy than I need to until the moment that I launch my attack. That might be your fighting style. Some people get really good at just kind of waiting. Meyer doesn't recommend it. He says people who wait are either very skilled or very foolish. Most of the time foolish, but it can be done. You need to find someone, you need to find the tools that work for you to take that more passive style of fighting and learn really well how to set up traps that you can draw people into and do without requiring a ton of expenditure of energy on your part, and let them tire themselves out. You can just wait them out. I don't have a gladiator sword, unfortunately. I don't have anything like Roman. When swords make contact, wouldn't the edges chip? Yes. Yes, they would. The actual historical sharpness of swords is not something that we can really know for sure. That's really hard to we have survivorship bias. It's just hard to say exactly. It's one of those things that they certainly knew how sharp they wanted their swords, but as far as us trying to figure out how sharp that meant, what was sharp for them, it's hard for us to pinpoint that. But yes, two sharp swords, if they meet edge on edge, they will take gouges out of their edges. That's just, the swords are ultimately disposable weapons. They're expensive, but they're ultimately disposable. So, but they can also be repaired. So, edge damage can be fixed to a point. If it's damaged to the point that it cannot be fixed, then all right, time for a new sword. But if you think about the number of times in a single pass, if we are talking like an unarmored fight with two people with two swords, the number of times their swords are going to be biting into each other before somebody's on the ground is, relatively speaking, like not a lot. And most of your edge on edge stuff is going to be happening. One person's going to be cutting in, one person's going to be parrying. And I don't know. I'm going to drop that one. That line of thinking. I don't like where that's going. But yeah, the odds of you completely destroying your swords to like where they just cannot work at all is highly unlikely. So the sword will take some edge damage, but you could take a lot of damage before you ruin the sword. And then if you've survived the fight, wonderful. Take your sword back and grind out the chips, the notches. Smooth, grind it out. Good as new. I think Kendo's neat. It's a bit limited on targets for me, but I think it's cool. I like their uniforms. I'm a little jealous about the Kendo uniforms. I think they look really cool. What weightlifting conditioning routine do I do? Not enough. Good night, Magnus. I'm gonna wrap things up. It's getting dark. They probably won't be, especially if you're new. They're probably pretty understanding. A lot of beginners tend to have difficulty committing, and even people who've been doing it for a while will dip in and out. We tend to see we definitely experience in our own club with beginner classes a sort of like seasonal depression, so to speak. but not like actually like depression, but like a seasonal decline in attendance of people just being like, and then they tend to resurface. So like they tend to stick around through the summer, and then once fall hits and it starts getting like really dark out, and you just don't have much sunlight, the attendance tends to like bottom out, and then over the course of the winter, when it starts to get more daylight out, they start to reemerge. People just when it gets dark out, people just get kind of moody. That's just normal. That's human. Oh yeah, hour 20 minutes. I've hit my benchmark for the um, objective there. Thank you, Small Bean Regarder. I like that, Small Bean Regarder. What's the best kind of bean, Small Bean Regarder? You have regarded many beans, I assume. Are like, is it kitty toe beans? Those are pretty good. Or is there a secret other kind of animal toe bean that's even better than cat toe beans? Heinz baked beans. Oh, we're just going straight into the proper beans. Interesting. Heinz baked. We have it here. Heinz baked beans are the best beans. How concerned should you be about rust? Okay, so the thing to me, so if your sword is just going to be home decor, probably the best thing you can do is get Renaissance wax. If you get some Renaissance wax, and it's specifically made by the British Museum British Museum, I think, for the preservation of just like anything. You get yourself some Renaissance wax. It's going to be pricey, but it's going to be like a tiny little bottle, but it's going to last forever. You just get that. You get a cloth. You clean the sword off. You take a cloth. You rub it in the wax, and you apply the wax along the blade. It's going to dry clear, and your sword's going to look totally fine. And it's now encased in a layer of wax, so no rust. Because it's the oxidation on the blade that you got to watch out for. Once you cut that thing in, as long as it's dry, because H2O, the oxygen, you don't want that oxygen. I don't know exactly I don't exactly know the science per se, so I'm going to stop right there. But the important thing here is, as long as the sword's dry and you're keeping moisture away and you have encased it, the dry sword, the dry clean sword, in wax, as long as that wax seal is there, the sword's going to be fine. I haven't like, so as far as like holding a reserve weapon in a shield, yes, but I don't have like a ton of thought on it. Like it just seems useful. I don't think it's necessarily like a secret technique or anything like that. I think it's just, yeah, if you've got a spare hand, then yeah, sure, hold a reserve thing. Executioner swords. What about them? They are purpose built for a very specific job. There's a reason why they're called executioner swords, because they are for execution. They are not for other stuff. They are not for fighting. Although video games like to use them for fighting, they are not for fighting. They are for executions. That's their whole purpose. They're really good for it. They are specially designed to give you the best odds of a single stroke chop of the head. That's what they're meant for. One cut, one kill. They're not meant to do anything else. So trying to use them for other stuff, they're not very good, because their one job is to deliver a single wham. And trying to ask them to do anything else, that's outside their job role. So they won't be good at it. Is cereal a soup? That's a fun one. Is cereal a soup? I don't know. Cereal is soup. Is milk a broth? I mean, I guess you could put. Yeah, you could put milk. Like you could do a milk-based broth. I usually think of a condition of soup is that it's usually meant to be soup. Soup tends to be served warm, but I know there are soups that aren't served warm, because I feel like that's the like that's the go-to is like cereal's not a soup because it's cold. And then people are like, well, blah 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 is a soup, and it's served cold, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what soup that is, but I assume there's a soup that's served cold. But it doesn't feel like a soup. How to travel with a sword on a backpack. Carefully. You probably want something other than the backpack for it. How do you deal with southpaws? With frustration and confusion until you realize what's happening. People will be like southpaw, and I just like won't realize that they're southpaw because I do longsword. So like your sword is like, you know, your hand, like the arms themselves. I don't tend to look at the hands very much when I'm fencing. So as far as what I'm seeing, I'm just kind of seeing shoulder shift, shoulder shift. Like I've just switched hands, and I switched again, right? But it doesn't look all that different. I'm not usually watching the hands. I'm usually watching kind of like solar plexus-y kind of area. And so I don't always realize that they're left-handed until they do something weird. And I go, wait a second, you're left-handed. And then then I realize why I was having trouble. And then I continue to have trouble because they're weird. So yeah, I tend to chase their sword arm quite aggressively. Like that. But so one thing to bear in mind is that when you are not mirrored, if they're left-handed and you're right-handed, then that means you both have mirrored strong side pushing. So if you are, I'm trying to see. So I'm gonna make this thing into a lefty. Here, lefty. So if you're a lefty, and I go here, yes. So if you're a righty versus a lefty, you want to get outside their sword because you can push. This is strong, like pushing this way is stronger for you than trying to push this way. So like if they're on this side and you're trying to like push like this is a weaker movement for you than this is. You can kind of see, right? I can do like this, or I can go whoosh very easily like that. So you are both going to be jockeying for the opportunity to get on the outside of your strong side. So you can kind of like apply pressure and they will be weaker. Because when you're lefty, or when you are righty versus righty, you are matched. So my strong side meets their strong side. My weak side meets their weak side. Neutral. But when lefty righty, your weak side is on their strong side and their strong side is on your weak side. Or yeah. So it's a lot of jockeying for that position. It inverts. It's weird. So you need to be mindful of that. Yes, I have seen the video of the Kendo teacher trying out a longsword. I was going to do a video response, but then everybody else did one, and I watched Matt Easton's, and then he went and said basically everything I was going to say for the first 3/4 of his video. I'm like, people are just going to say I just copied his homework if I make a video, so I didn't. But yeah, if you want my opinion on the video, just watch Matt Easton's video because he says everything I would have said anyways. How small can a sword be considered and still be considered a sword? I think a general rule of thumb is about the length of your forearm. So if something is like the length of your forearm, or the length of your forearm or shorter. So like if you're holding, I guess, yeah. So like if you're holding the handle and the blade is the length of your forearm, it's usually a dagger. So forearm or less, dagger. Forearm or more, sword. And of course, this means people of different sizes will have, it'll be different, right? Like a child's sword will be a dagger to an adult. And I think that's okay. I won't worry about it too much. No hard rules. I'm having fun just kind of pricking the leaves. No, that's totally fine, Vio. Why do films and games make long swords really heavy and slow? Well, they make swords really heavy and slow in general, and that's partially just telegraphing. If I do a big slow swing, boom, it gives the player time to react. As opposed to, because remember, like, you know, you're playing on a screen, you're not like actually like one-to-one seeing the person. There are so many subtle things that your eye can pick up on when you're actually facing off with the person that you can make these really quick reactions. Or just like even just like feeling, you can like get physical feeling on that sword, and you can, even without seeing them, you know through just the sensation of their sword against your sword, the moment that pressure leaves, you know they're coming to, they're moving around again. You can't do that in a video game. You only have sight and hearing, and maybe like a little bit of tactile feedback with the vibration in a controller, but you are largely constrained. And then further, you're looking at a screen. It might be a very close screen, but it's still a screen. So there's an element of like shrinkage going on. So subtle details, you know, you might be able to like, something really important for a fencer would be picking up on the difference between somebody doing this and somebody doing this. Like that's how acute the detail that a fencer's picking up on is, whether their opponent's twisting slightly that way, or maybe they are, the difference between them being here and them being here is a huge difference to a fencer. But in a game, you're not going to be able to pick up on that detail. So in game land, everything has to become so much bigger. They have to do everything big, huge movements. Boom, I'm cutting, just to make it obvious to the player. I own so many swords. Thoughts on using stuff like soil, leaves, etc. available at a place where you fight to distract the opponent, not to attack. So like in friendly sparring, that'd probably be a faux pas, but using sort of like environmental distractions is definitely a thing in fencing manuscripts. Godinho recommends pocket sand. Literally, he says, have a pouch with you that is full of sand, the finest sand you can get. And you just, before the fight starts, you just grab a handful and go whoosh, you throw it at their face. He actually says to have 2 bags is the best part. So he doesn't just say one. So he says you should have 2 bags of pocket sand, so that you can sit there and you go like casting the sand. Because like if you're getting accosted by multiple people, you're sitting there throwing the sand at them all, and then when you run out of sand in the one pocket, they'll think, aha, we got them now, and they start to encroach on you. And then you go, well, wait, I have more pocket sand, and then you start throwing the second bag of sand at them. It's great. Godinho is wonderful. I love Godinho. He has another one where he says, you take your sword off, like in the scabbard, and you kind of present it and you say, I swear on this cross that I will not fight you to this day. And as you go to kiss it, you instead smash it into his face and then like draw the sword and then cut him down. So you do it before you actually swear on the thing. That's the important part. Because swearing on the cross would be bad, but faking that you're going to swear on the cross. You're like, you're like, I swear, and then you just deck the guy. There's another guy who says, when you're getting squared up against, if like you're kind of like faced off with the guy, and you're like, hey, I'll fight you, but I'm not going to fight the both of you. And there's no other guy, but you just go, I won't fight the both of you, and you point off to the other guy, and as soon as our guy goes, huh? You go, boom, and you kill him. It is ridiculous. But like I was watching another video of a guy who has like experience, like he was like an ex-cop or whatever, and he had experience like street fighting and stuff. And that he did that exact trick to the guy in the video. He was like, he didn't do it exactly. He just kind of went like, he just kind of looked, like kind of like this, like alarmed, like what's that? And the guy looked, and then he was on him. It's a fake out with the eyes. You look at something, It's human nature to be like, what are you looking at? And as soon as they look, you hit them. Anyways, yeah, it's getting really, really dark. So I'm going to wrap it up. If anybody has any like super burning questions, somebody was asking me to show the weapons. I'll do that as I kind of pack up. So as I pack up, okay, so here, first thing, this is my Siggy longsword. It's a Siggy shorty. I prefer the shorty to the regular, the standard. I kind of like this length for my longswords. The standard would be like up to here. I find that's just a little big. I like this length. I find that this works better for me. We have my Malleus Martialis Chevalier 2 side sword. Yeah, if I should have walked over like so you could see, but yeah, that's a very, very short grip, right? There's not a ton of room for a hand here because you're not really supposed to hold it this way. You're supposed to hold it this way. So yeah, more this way, kind of getting that little wrap around there, and then getting that to there. And suddenly the sword size makes a lot of sense. Everything kind of locks in there. But yeah, if you needed to, yeah, you could hold it this way, but you're pretty much constrained to hammer fisting it. But do it like that, and you're in business. Then accompanying it is a parrying dagger. Parrying dagger, side sword. Then I have my GDFB German halberd mounted on an ash haft. I got it stuck in the tree. There we go, it's free. It is tall. That tall. It's as high as I can reach, which is a sizing trick. I do not have a Roman sword. Oh yeah, night fighting would be fun with sufficient lighting. But anyways, it seems to be kind of the gist of the questions. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope you all have a great night.